My name is Liesl Pretorius. Do you need the mic? Okay. Good evening. My name is Liesl Pretorius. I'm an attorney. I'm the head of legal with Freedom of Religion South Africa, or FORSA for short. FORSA is a legal advocacy organization dedicated to upholding the right to religious freedom and related rights in South Africa within the framework of the South African Constitution. As an organization, what is very important and linked to religious freedom is obviously the right of parents, and we'll be speaking about families and schools and children this evening, and also the autonomy of religious organizations to conduct their own internal affairs. As an organization, we are politically neutral, faith neutral, and doctrinally neutral. And the work that we do includes making representations to Parliament, to government departments, etc., engaging with the religious community specifically to raise awareness and education about their rights and their responsibilities, and enabling members of the public to engage in the democratic lawmaking process, to engage with persons and organizations whose rights are being threatened. We also build key stakeholder relationships with allied and like-minded organizations, and engage with the media to raise awareness about these important issues. So I think let me start with the ECE Toolkit, the Early Childhood Education Toolkit. Now this is a toolkit produced by the Department of Basic Education. It's aimed at children aged 0 to 9 years, because that's early childhood education. The department will say that this is a teacher training material, but who will these teachers be training? Where will the teachers go with the knowledge that they are being given through this toolkit? This toolkit is also in its final form, and it has been rolled out in at least 5 provinces. So why are we concerned by this toolkit? Well, first of all, we're concerned about parental rights. We're concerned about lack of meaningful public participation, and we're also concerned about the rights of teachers. So let's start with parental rights. And just to give you a little background on parental rights. So the policy document, the white paper on education and training, is a policy document for basic education, and it means laws in that sector need to conform to this policy document. This document states unequivocally that parents have the inalienable right to choose the kind of education that is best for their children, particularly in the early years of schooling. This is the early childhood education toolkit. So especially in the early years of schooling. And that includes the religious and cultural basis of that child's education. Parents also have a right to be consulted concerning what is being taught to their children. So that's why meaningful public participation is important. Broad, meaningful public participation. We are not sure that any parent was consulted, and we are not sure that most parents are even still aware of this toolkit. So what is the concern with the toolkit? The toolkit is ideological. It proposes a certain worldview on sex and gender to the exclusion or marginalization of other worldviews. Now, public schools, at least in South Africa, have to be ideologically neutral. That doesn't mean that worldviews, including religions, are not welcome in public schools. It only means that you can't have one to the exclusion of others. There should be space for everyone. But this toolkit has a very specific way that it views sex and gender. And I want to just read some quotes from the toolkit so that you can decide for yourselves what you think the ideological view of this toolkit is. It says, most of us have been raised with the idea that there are 2 sexes, male and female, and that they align with 2 genders, man and woman. However, both sex and gender exists across a continuum of possibilities. ECD teachers and practitioners play a critical role in providing equal opportunities for all young children to engage and learn and help them break free from harmful gender stereotypes that hold them back in life. Use pictures and stories to talk about gender roles and promote gender diversity. Display examples of gender non-conforming individuals, and use activities to question gender roles and stereotypes to promote gender equality. Growing up, many of us were taught that if you were identifying as a single person, that by a pronoun you had to use he or she. They was only for a group of people. Those rules have changed. They or them is now a non-binary way to address someone. Using they and them lets children know that we cannot assume somebody's gender just by looking at them. Many families and communities hold to prevailing harmful gender roles and boundaries, and may also impose gender stereotypes and expectations on children. I don't know, some people feel like they are either a boy or a girl, and there are also children who feel like they are both, or they don't feel like either one. There are lots of ways to be boys or girls or something else. Isn't that great? By asking learners from a young age for their preferred name and pronoun, teachers can make room for children who may be exploring their gender identity and demonstrate that gender identity should not be assumed. Tell me, what do you think makes someone a real boy or a real girl? Do you think we get to decide for others, or do each of us get to decide for ourselves? Well, we don't know by just looking at someone what their gender is, who they are. Use children's references to stereotypical ideas about gender as a teachable moment about the incredible variations of gender that exists. So I've read direct quotes from the toolkit. And I wanted to use those direct quotes because when FORSA put out a landing page where we started to address these things, we were slapped with a fake news allegation. But please decide for yourself whether you agree, because we were very careful to use direct quotes and we used page numbers as well. So we are concerned about parental rights because this is a very specific worldview. This clashes with parents' rights to raise their own children according to their own cultural, to their own religious beliefs and values. That is a right that the Education White Paper recognizes. That is a right that's entrenched in international law. There was no meaningful public participation. And then obviously teachers in the workplace also have the right to freedom of religion. They might be forced to use words that they don't want to use. That's freedom of expression. As an organization, together with a coalition of religious leaders of various faith groups, Christian, Muslim, and the African spirituality faiths, we met with the Department of Basic Education twice, in December last year and March this year. We presented a 36-page document of concerns, setting out what the concerns were. We asked that there be a public engagement process, that these documents that are coming through the department, that they are scrutinized. We asked for a moratorium on the rollout of this toolkit until there's been a proper consultation, and we asked for the establishment of a family values unit in the department to build a critical bridge so that parents, who are the main stakeholders in their children's education, and their communities, and everybody who has a part in this child's life, can speak to the department, because that would be in the best interest of children. These requests have been dismissed, and the department is adamant that they will continue with the rollout of this toolkit. So that is our concern. But what we have done is we have created a web page, a special dedicated web page on our website, where we put more information about the toolkit. You can find links to the toolkit there, and you can go see for themselves, because we are not child development experts. We are not commenting on the content of the toolkit, but we are saying that parents have a right regarding what is being taught to their children. They have a right to be consulted about that, and that they need to be given that opportunity, and they have not been given that opportunity. And there's a survey that you can complete as well, so we encourage people to do that, to have their say about this content. And we also do note the concerns that those who are working in the medical field or the child development field have about content such as this. So that's the one thing. The other matter that I would like to speak about is the hate speech bill, the Combating of Hate Crimes and Hate Speech bill. You might have heard of this. This is a bill that's currently on the President's desk. The last time I checked, it has not been signed into law. This bill is a big threat for the freedom of religious expression, particularly. The bottom line is that the reason why this bill is problematic is that while nobody is condoning true hate speech, and that in hate speech, as properly defined by the Constitution, is not protected speech, this bill goes a lot wider. It's arguably wider than the Equality Act, the Equality Act, which deals with civil hate speech. And without going into a lot of the legal detail, it's because you have a definition of hate speech that's very wide, and it's a criminal law. So the wider this net of this definition is, the more that's captured under it. So things that are legitimate expressions that should probably be protected, can be caught up into this net. And what this could lead to is that you are saying something based on your religious beliefs, on something such as sex and gender and marriage, and now it might be misconstrued as hate speech. Because this definition of hate speech, hatred is not defined. That's a quintessential element of this crime of hate speech, but hatred is not defined, despite the Kulani judgment that speaks to civil hate speech, saying, hatred should be this and that. It's not defined in this bill. Then it has a very wide definition of harm. It includes things such as emotional harm, that's very subjective. It includes social harm, which is defined as anything that undermines the social cohesion of South Africa. It's interesting that the unit in the Department of Basic Education that produced the ECE Toolkit is called the Social Cohesion Unit. So if you perhaps, what does this mean? I'm just asking questions. What does this mean? So if you're not supporting certain views, are you now undermining social cohesion? The hate speech bill, the hate speech definition also has a lot of listed grounds on which you can commit hate speech, and the groups against whom you can commit hate speech. And it's a wide list. It's much wider than the Constitution's 4 grounds, and even if you add the 5th ground from Kulani, it's much wider. It includes novel concepts, contested concepts, fluid concepts, such as gender expression and sex characteristics and gender identity, those things. So when you start putting all of this together, again, and nobody's condoning true hate speech, but it's where is the line of this bill? Because we don't want to criminalize legitimate religious expression, because freedom of religion and freedom of expression are cornerstone rights of any democracy. We don't want people to self-censor out of fear that they might be prosecuted. Even if it's a prosecution that goes away, there's a massive emotional cost to prosecution. We want a vibrant society that actually celebrates, as the Constitution says, unity in diversity, not unity in conformity. And then the hate speech bill has a religious exemption clause, but it's worded in such a circular way that it's actually very self-defeating. So in the end, you have a bill that is that's highly problematic, and that does not set the requisite threshold for hate speech. And we are concerned that what the bill then would criminalize, and the sentence, if you're found guilty of hate speech, is up to 5 years imprisonment, or a fine of undetermined amount. But we are concerned that what might be criminalized is not true hate speech, but speech that someone hates. And a big problem with any bill that has vague terms is a vague term in a law is open to subjective interpretation. Something that is open to subjective interpretation is open to arbitrary application, which means it's open to abuse. It can be abused. And if we look at what is happening overseas, we want to protect our democracy. We do not support unfair discrimination against any person. But we want to protect our democracy because, for example, in Finland, there's a member of parliament who is facing how many rounds of criminal trials. With each court, she gets found not guilty, but then it gets appealed, because she tweeted Bible verses. And we don't want that for South Africa. We cherish our democracy. We cherish the rich diversity of our people. But for that, we need freedom of religion. And freedom of religion is a very wide right in the Constitution. It includes secular worldviews as well. And we also need our freedom of expression.